If you're thinking of getting solar right now, or a hybrid inverter, or a battery storage system, then in this series of reviews I'm going to be looking at hybrid and battery inverters and as many systems as I can to try and give you the knowledge you need before you go out and purchase a system. Today we're going to be looking at the Livatech hybrid inverter and their own storage battery and looking at some of the pros and cons we've learnt on this system. Now, if this system isn't for you, then make sure you click that notification bell because there is more reviews coming on hybrid and solar inverters. Now, I've tried to make this video as simple and as easy to follow, so I've divided it up into chapters that are down below, because not everyone wants the same information. The first part, we're going to be looking about the physical hardware of the unit, stuff that we've learned from installing it and touching it and feeling it. Next, we'll move into the app to talk about what that does, the functionality of the app, and then we'll move into the warranty and what it's like to get these systems repaired and how you get them repaired if you need to. And then finally, we're going to be moving into some of the more extensive tests that we've done using some temperature sensors here in the garage and also some external equipment with CT clamps to measure the efficiency of the battery. Now, let's be honest, this system is very slim and very, very good looking. It's much more stylish than other inverters that you see. Now, we won't get into the debate whether you need an isolator because it does have one built in the battery and it also has a solar isolator built in. But if you did want to be one of those electricians that fits extra isolators, there's plenty of room behind here where you can fit your isolators. You can obviously backfeed the cables or you can bring it in through the side like we've done here, which keeps things really, really neat. Now, unlike some other systems, what Livatech have done is they've decided to go for a much taller design, so the unit here is a lot longer, but it's a lot thinner off the wall. The profile does not stick out as much. Now, it's up to you which you think might be better, but I think if you're fitting these outside down gable ends or in kitchens or somewhere where encroaching into the space is not ideal, having a smaller, thinner design and longer on the batteries is probably a little bit better. But let me know what you think down below in the comments. Now, the whole casing here is metal and it is painted in a white gloss finish. Very, very nice and stylish, and it's very easy to keep clean with just a wipe of a cloth. Now, that might make you want to put it somewhere where kids can get, but we'll get back to why I don't think that'll be a good point in a bit. Moving on from that, if we look at the design here, at the back we have cooling fins. So the back of this unit is all cooling fins, which means there's no fan, which means that this unit is very, very quiet. In fact, I was tempted to do on these reviews a decibel meter, but there is literally no audible noise that you can hear from this at all, so there was no point putting a decibel meter to measure the difference of it being on or off. There is literally zero noise from this machine at all, so you could definitely put it in a loft space or somewhere close to where you might sleep because you're not going to hear it click on and click off. There is a small relay click when it is initially charging or discharging, but when it is just discharging, once that click's gone, the unit is silent, and even that click is very, 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 very quiet. Now, while we're in here, we might as well look at a couple of the technical features. So first of all, we have the DC isolator here for the solar strings on and off. We have two separate MPTTs, which means you can have two strings of solar, one for your east roof, one for your west roof, without having any extra components draining off your power. We then have your main incoming here for your main supply, which can do the main supply to charging the battery and also discharging the battery back to your house. We then have a backup supply, EPS supply, which I've not got connected in this scenario. We then have the communication comms port. Now, this does a couple of things. This can communicate to the CT clamp or a mini smart meter which has a CT clamp with it. It can also, as you can see, I've got two Ethernets coming out of this. It can also communicate with their Livatech EV charger, which we'll get to mentioning back in a minute. We then have this connection here. This is the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi dongle. Now, it doesn't have a direct hard Ethernet connection. It is going to be Bluetooth and Ethernet, but it's got a decent reception on this. We'll get back to that in a minute. We've also got here the BMS communication protocol, and we have the battery fly leads to go down to the battery. Now, this battery here is a 5 kilowatt hour battery. You can link them in series, which we'll get back to in a minute. But on the battery, we have a couple of connections. We have a DC isolator on and off, and we also have an actual switch on and off. So there's basically no chance of a DC spark. You turn the battery off by the DC switch, and then you the main isolator to turn off the DC and disconnect. Really, really safe procedures there. What we do have a problem with here is the way the DC battery here is connected. Now the reason there's a problem with this is the fly leads come into here, not the problem, that's fine, it's got to be connected. The problem is, you can put your fingers in here, and if you're a small child, this cover is not screwed on, it's not secured on. So a kid could accidentally knock this cover off and shove their little delicate fingers in here, and you know, kids like to poke 2 fingers in, so if they joined their fingers between the red and the black, they'd have about 50 DC current going through them, which might mean they might have a little bit sore black fingers. Mentioning black, it's a shame they don't do this in black. This is a 5 kilowatt inverter, but they do other versions, including a 3.68 and some other versions, so check out the website. Also, if you did go for the 5 kilowatt and there was an export limitation on you, you can set export limitations in the app. There's another thing to work out of this is a IP rated unit on the inverter. So the inverter can go outside. Now if you've got this battery that I've got, this isn't waterproof. It can't go outside, but they have got an IP rated battery and inverter package that go together coming out soon. Probably out by the time this video is out. These modules of battery are modular. You can have more than one. Now this is only 5 kilowatts with a usable capacity of 4.5 kilowatt hours. So it's a 5 kilowatt hour battery, 4.5 kilowatt hours is usable, and you can have 5 of these modules all next to each other. Now you're going to ask, obviously I've took the cover off just so you can see inside, it looks a bit better for the content of the video, but if you had 5 of these, Nick, they're not going to look as pretty. Well, Livatech have thought of that, which is why you have this modesty cover that goes over the battery. So if the battery was one unit, you'd have the normal Livatech cover there, and then there's a cable in here for the next battery, which goes there, and then the next battery again, or to that side, and you can stack them all next to each other really, really neatly. Now it'd be nice to possibly see another battery from Livatech, and I can probably show you how easy it is to install 2, 3, 4, 5 batteries, but it is literally a plug-and-play system, and they all look really neat next to each other. Now the first issue I need to mention is when we were installing it, the instructions weren't typically clear. So Lee read the instructions for this Livatech inverter when we were installing it, and one of the problems we had is that they sent a chint meter for us to then connect as a CT clamp. Now we thought this chint meter was a whole current meter. We should have really read the side of the chint meter. All it was a communication to plug a CT in. So that chint meter didn't need any current going through it, just needed power. And that power then just wanted a CT clamp connecting into the top of the meter to communicate back to the inverter. The reason why we got confused is because the CT clamp that Livatech provided was too small. In fact, so small that I could just about get a pen through it. It wasn't going to clip around my main incoming tails to monitor any of my house supply. Now, I've had a word with Livatech and the distributor for Livatech in the UK, and they've assured me that everyone who orders a Livatech now will have a proper size CT clamp that will fit around UK standard tails. So that is some good news. Now, another thing I need to mention is that this review has been seriously delayed. And the reason it's been delayed is we were having massive issues with the Livatech app, and one of the major issues we're having is we couldn't get it to behave. It wasn't charging up properly and it wasn't discharging properly. Livatech did fix it, and they fixed it pretty quick. Within about 25-30 days of me having a word with their communication protocol, they fixed it, they tested it in their lab, and they reproduced the fault. So hands up to them. They did it really fast, they admitted there was a fault, and they fixed it very, very quickly. Now, during the install process, we mentioned it has an EPS circuit, but we didn't fully explain what that does and what it can do on this system. Now, EPS is an emergency power system. So what you can do is you can have a separate set of devices on a different consumer board that are separate to the normal house loads and separate to the normal grid that just get powered from the battery part of the inverter or the solar part of the inverter, which means if there's a power cut, these circuits carry on running. Now this could be very, very useful if you live in an area prone to blackouts, prone to power cuts, which can happen especially in England, and these units are very popular in Australia where power outages do happen fairly often. What this also means is if there was a power outage, the solar will carry on powering the batteries, and let's say you drained the batteries, they were completely flat, the next day when the sun comes back up, you still don't have the national grid back, the system will charge back up off the solar. It will cold start the grid, cold start the battery, so you still have power even in a very long prolonged blackout. Now the LiveTech app is very well designed, and I've used it here in dark mode, and it's very similar to some other apps, and the reason is it works well and everyone seems to copy this design because it looks so good. I've seen some other apps that try to go by their own design and they just don't look as good as this. The energy flow on it works really well. I find it very, very weird that I can just stare at it and enjoy it. I don't know why. I know it's weird, but don't ask. The data that comes onto the app via the Wi-Fi signal on this is only updated every 5 minutes. If you want live data, you're going to have to connect to the Bluetooth on this. The Bluetooth on this has a really good signal. In fact, it's so good that I can operate this from my kitchen. Now, before I mentioned that the LiveTech had a software issue and they fixed it. Now, they did this by pushing a software update to the inverter and forcing it to take an update. You can update this inverter yourself, and it is done by using the Bluetooth part of the app. Bluetooth connection to the app shows you that there's been an update. Two things that I'm a bit annoyed about. First of all, there's no notification in the standard Wi-Fi part of the app to tell you that there is a software update available and you need to connect by Bluetooth. Second of all, you can't update it via the Wi-Fi app. You can only update it when you're into the Bluetooth mode. It should allow you to do both. If they can force an update to my LiveTech unit without me having, being logged into the app, it can be done in Wi-Fi mode. So I'd like to see LiveTech apply that, or at least apply a notification in the Wi-Fi part of the app to tell you to log into the Bluetooth to update the inverter or maybe the BMS software. Now, there is some security holes in the Bluetooth system and the way the user setting works. Now, LiveTech have promised me that these will be fixed by the time this video gets released. Now, some of the settings that were accessible by the user with a basically easily guessed password, and I mean really easily guessed, could let you change the G99, G98 settings, and also some of the way the grid works on the system. These shouldn't be accessible by the engineer, never mind the user. Now, in certain countries, not the UK, these settings might have needed access to, but when you selected this for a UK, being installed unit, these should be locked out, and the password should be of much harder guesswork than the one that was in it. Now, the battery has a couple of modes in it, and we're going to go through all the modes and what they do and for which user they are best. So first of all, we have a backup mode. Backup mode is literally as it sounds. It is for backup, for emergencies. It will store the power that's in the battery or let the solar charge up the battery to full power and hold that full power battery until you need it. For example, if you know there's going to be a power cut, they're going to be working on the power lines, there's an emergency, prediction, and you need the full battery, put it in backup mode, it will hold the battery's power, and when there's a power cut, it will power those EPS circuits from a full battery so you're not wasting it, discharging it for just general house use. That's a really good idea. There's also self-use mode. Self-use mode is for people with solar that just want to use as much of their own solar power as possible, so it will prioritize the house being powered by the solar as much as it can. Then it will power up by charging up the battery, and then that battery will discharge to the house depending on what load it is. It will always try to maximize that you don't do any export. You then have the use that I use, which is self-defined. Now, I use self-defined because I don't have solar, but even if you do have solar, you might want to use self-defined if you're on Octopus Flux. Octopus Flux is an energy deal from Octopus that pays you more for exporting at certain times. There's a video about that, so right, go and check it out. It's too long-winded to talk about it now, but what I use this for me, is to charge up during my off-peak hours on Octopus Go/Intelligent, and then discharge during my normal use as if I, were just discharging the battery to get full use of it. This means that I'm using as much off-peak power as I can, and during the peak, my battery is discharging back to the house. Now, they also have the LiveTech charger, and this is quite important if you've got solar and a battery system, because many people will know if you plug your car in and you've got solar, you might end up pulling from the grid, and that's not good news. So what this does is it talks to the inverter by communication port, COM port, and it will say you can set this for various settings: don't discharge the battery, only charge from solar, or pull from the grid. And by doing that communication protocol, it means that the 5 kilowatt or whatever module system you've gone for doesn't get discharged into your car, because that's not what you want. And there's a lot of systems that don't talk to each other, which means that what you could end up doing is plugging your car in at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and the battery in your inverter is discharged into your car rather than using the grid. With a system that talks to it and that communicates with it, you won't get that problem. So I do hope that we hopefully do look at this LiveTech charger and see if the charger is as good as the inverter and battery system that I've looked at. Now, LiveTech may sound like a new company, but actually it's not. Its sister company's been going around for a lot longer, and LiveTech used to make inverters for another well-known, well-used battery system here in the UK. They've now decided to stop selling it under a different brand to another company and actually make it themselves and sell it themselves. Now, the good news for you is LiveTech's 10-year warranty is backed by LiveTech, the brand. However, in the UK, we have a UK distributor that buy the unit from LiveTech and distribute it to electrical wholesalers, who in turn then buy it. Your electrician will then buy it. But the good news is that distributor, as well as the 10-year warranty from LiveTech, has decided to do a swap and replace on these units, which means if you get a faulty unit, they will swap it out for a new one and replace it. Now, this could be a repaired unit, but why these units are so new, if they did go wrong, they'd be swapped and replaced for a new whole unit completely. Let's quickly mention some things that are worth remembering. This system is a Life Pro battery, LFP. LFP is one of the most stable lithium chemistries you can get. I've seen a lot of people talk about not putting these in your house because a lithium battery fire might happen. LFP do not get thermal runaway, the same as other batteries, and let's be honest, if you start getting a fire in your house, lithium doesn't go off like a bang, it burns slowly. Yes, it burns for a long time, but it's not an explosion, so you'd have enough time to escape your house, because you'd notice it was getting, a little bit fiery inside. So I wouldn't worry about putting one of these in your loft. If you're that worried, put a smoke alarm in your loft, put a heat sensor in your loft, and if there was a fire, the alarm would go off. Personally, I wouldn't worry about it. I don't think the lithium LFP batteries have a history of going off on fire, so it doesn't worry me. Don't always listen to what electricians say. Sometimes they are wrong, even though 99.9% of the time they are extremely intelligent, correct people. But there's a few that just get a little bit worried about things that aren't going to happen. Now, I've been having temperature sensors in this garage, there's temperature sensors in the battery integrated into the LiveTech software, and we've got a Hawk CT monitoring device with special software from a good friend of Oliver, who lent me the Hawk system, called Jamie. If you've got a Hawk system, the software is excellent. It gets some really detailed data. Too much more than what we need, but there's other uses for that data that we may come to in another day. Now, we've learnt that it has a 20 watt-hour standby, so that's basically what it's using when it's not doing anything. This 5 kilowatt inverter, I've noticed it doesn't really go above 4.6, 4.7 kilowatt output, so it's not hitting its full 5, but I'd take that 4.7 as acceptable, for me. It's enough to boil a kettle, so that's the important data. The charging thing, though, I actually thought 5 kilowatt inverter would charge at 5 kilowatts. It doesn't, not off the grid. It only charges at 2.5 is the highest we've seen on the Hawk system testing. And if you want to see more detailed results from the Hawk system, then go to evnic/battery. There's information of the Hawk system where you can download and buy the software for the Hawk if you've got one, and hopefully a full written review coming very soon on the LiveTech with all the data that we've pulled out of all the testing equipment and machines that we've got here trying to review the batteries. If you're interested in learning more about battery tech, this battery, or seeing other reviews of batteries, then check out this playlist here, where I'm going to put them all in one handy section.